But very excited to introduce the next fireside chat. This will be a bit more of an intimate conversation. We've taken sort of a macro look at the developments in the crypto and blockchain space in recent years, where we're headed going into the future, how we got here, etc. But the following fireside chat will focus specifically on the state of crypto in 2022. So where are we right now, really, right? Again, it's easy to take a look at where we hope to be in 5 years and analyze how we got here, but where are we exactly? And particularly that mapping will be accomplished through a lovely conversation between two gentlemen. So I'm pleased to welcome after the table, of course, Todd Gordon. He is managing partner and he's managing partner of Ropart Asset Management Funds, as well as chief operating officer at Visalis. Welcome, Todd. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I don't know what that says about me, but I'm going, yes. So I'm very involved in crypto with Castor Labs, Make International. I'm a venture partner with Tim Draper's Blockchain Fund. But I am very, very excited to be speaking with Brock Pierce, the visionary, true visionary of all things cryptocurrency and blockchain.
And I think Brock's officially mic'd up, so we get to welcome him to the stage. Todd, I invite you to take a seat. Brock, I invite you to take a seat. And please enjoy. The next half hour is going to be very interesting.
Thank you.
So obviously we're here to talk about the state of crypto, and it's been an exciting couple weeks. And obviously no one better than Brock to talk about that. So maybe we can start with just your general thoughts on the state of crypto. There's been some waves recently. Maybe talk about that, talk about what you think generally, and then talk about some of your more direct relationships with some of the countries that are adopting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as official currencies of their country.
Well, I think we have to start with the recent terror that we've experienced, right? Terra Luna and the implosion of UST is obviously the big thing that's happened, and it's going to create a call for increased legislation and regulation. It's clearly a big catalyst for that. First of all, I think it's important to note that this was an experimental, algorithmic, sort of stable coin. It was a big experiment because people put too much trust in it too soon. It's important with this type of infrastructure that it's been sufficiently battle tested. You don't just put all the money behind something that's new until it's weathered the storms, a bear market, a crypto winter. I remember looking at the first sort of stable coin, BitUSD, for those of you that remember BitShares. That was my partner at Block 1 and EOS, Dan Larimer and Charles Hodgkinson. Me and a couple of my partners were the largest BitUSD holders and figured out very quickly we could break this thing, which is where the idea of Tether came from. As an alternative, recognizing the need for a stable coin, a hedging instrument that allow us to move from crypto assets into fiat assets as efficiently as we can move from crypto to crypto. And so that's the main lesson. It's largely been compartmentalized. And a lot of the market pricing right now is really not been triggered by us, though one of the promises of our industry is that we're creating an uncorrelated asset class. That when the markets are down, in theory, this should be something that is acting as a hedge, similar to the store of value proposition of gold. Clearly, we have not realized that promise yet. And if you had asked me a year ago if there had been rising inflation, instability in the financial markets, collapse, war in the world, if you had said, if all these things were happening at once, would crypto as an asset class decouple from the legacy or traditional financial markets? I'd say very likely. Clearly that hasn't happened. So I would be wrong. Yet. It hasn't happened yet, but I would be wrong thus far. And it may never happen. They may just continue to be. The world is so interconnected. Markets, and look at the performance of gold.
But exactly to your point, though, if you talk about currency markets, which have been around for 1,000 years, equity markets and bond markets that have been around for hundreds of years, and the crypto markets have been around for a decade. And so I think what you're saying makes sense. Yes, I would have imagined exactly what you have. They would have decoupled. It would actually be a good environment for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I would think that crypto would be, I would have guessed crypto would have performed well with all of what is happening right now. And again, we're seeing the same thing that we usually see. When the financial markets are up, crypto's up even more. When the financial markets are down, crypto's down even more. And in the same way that you have large cap and small caps, traditional behaviors, we're seeing the same thing. Your Bitcoins and your Ethers are down less. Your smaller cap altcoins are down more. And in the same way, they're up more in up markets. Higher highs, lower lows. At some point, that promise will be realized. I do believe, though, that there is a future, though, in algorithmic stablecoins. I think that the experiments have gotten larger and larger. This is a very large one. Lesson, again, diversification. You know, again, it got so big because of people chasing the DeFi yields on Anchor. They were promising the highest yields because it was being subsidized. And again, buyer beware. But it's fortunately been largely isolated. It is going to affect a few of the funds. And it certainly changed the conversation slightly, you know, at a governmental level. One of the main focuses I've had back in 2013, 14, and 15 was in educating government. I stopped that practice because I thought with the creation of Coin Center and the Digital Chamber of Commerce and all of these organizations that my job was done. I'm really only interested in the jobs that no one else will or can do. As soon as others are doing it sufficiently well, I normally check out and move on to the next thing. I'm kind of like an advanced team of sorts. I ran for president of the United States in 2020, and while on that campaign trail, I was talking to a lot of state legislators, and one of the things that I realized as I started spending more time in Washington, D.C., is how little they had been educated, how uninformed they were. I thought there was a lot of us, you know, taking the time to talk to our elected officials and informing them, and what I found out is it simply just wasn't happening. And so I have refocused a lot of my time and energy in making sure that happens. We have to be mindful of our existing system of governance, otherwise known as our government. And if we want our legislators to pass sensible legislation, they need to be well informed. And that is our responsibility. And one thing I'll tell you is everyone is interested. You know, people are not just rejecting it, they're generally embarrassed. You know, and they're just really delighted to have a private forum where they can admit their lack of understanding and ask questions, because politicians are usually expected to have the answers. And so I've found that they're always very open to the conversation. They want to be informed. And it's human nature to fear that which we don't understand. And we conquer fear with knowledge. Yep. So let's take the time to inform everyone. The other big thing that I've been focused on is globally what's happening. Obviously, what happened in El Salvador is a monumental event when we look back, you know, in the history books. President Bukele's leadership, his bold leadership, and remember, fortune favors the bold, but he was able to push forward a really aggressive sort of agenda with the Bitcoin law, and that is advance the conversation all over the world. And I think the combination of what we've seen in Miami, you know, Mayor Francis Suarez saying that municipal employees will be permitted to be paid in Bitcoin is kind of inconsequential, but it sends a very powerful signal where Miami's mayor said, we want the architects of the future to come here. We want the innovators to come here. We want you to bring your businesses here. And what that did is it said to those that are on the front lines of innovation, this is a place where the leadership wants to engage. They want to have an open dialogue. They want to work with you. And we've seen the economic impact that's had on Miami, enough to the point that the new mayor of New York City, within 2 days of being elected, while he wasn't yet in office, he's still mayor-elect, was watching businesses pack up and move from New York to Florida to slow that event from occurring, to mitigate some of that, before he was in office, he tweeted that he was going to take his next 3 paychecks in Bitcoin, which sent a signal to the market that the new mayor of New York City supports innovation and that you're going to have a different environment. So if you're an investor, it's safe to invest in businesses in New York City. If you're an entrepreneur, it's safe to build businesses in New York City. And that's important because there's a lot of talent there. It is still the capital of the world. And if it wishes to stay that way, it needs the right leadership. Obviously, the state legislature is putting a moratorium in place right now on crypto mining, which is having a chilling effect. It's sending the exact opposite message that the state might do things that makes doing business there impossible. So these conversations are important and critical. I was just in Panama a couple of days ago. I've been working actively with their legislative branch of government. They passed their crypto law about 2 weeks ago. All that's left to happen there is the president has to enact it in law. I was speaking at the Bloomberg New Economy Conference, and I was with the president of Panama when he made his announcement that got all the news, where he said he's not just going to sign it. And I know some in our community saw this as a very big negative. I think the president did exactly what he should do. They don't want to be on these gray lists. They want the benefit of the innovation, but they also don't want to find themselves losing the benefits of, call it, the status quo. And so he's going to be doing a review of the law. He says it's a good law. He wants this to happen. They just want to make sure that they're not going to find themselves, as they're bringing all this new sort of energy in, that being cast over with a shadow. The last panel mentioned some of this, but there's activity all over the world. And for those of you that have access to politicians, elected officials, legislators, I strongly encourage you to reach out and engage. We're living in that 4th industrial revolution, and the winners are being decided now. Which nations at the end of this century are going to be the ones that thrived through this period? And it's going to be not necessarily the first mover, but the fast followers. You don't have to be the pioneer and take all the arrows right now as a nation state. You just need to be looking at what everybody else is doing and be a fast follower. I mean, take a look at what's happened with the Bahamas. You know, with FTX moving there, we're talking about, what, $1 trillion of transactional activity moving to the Bahamas? They've just secured their seat at the table in the future. Panama's trying to do the same thing, and that is the opportunity that exists for nation states all over the world. Right now, you just need to pass a law that means almost nothing to send a signal to the market that you're open to innovation. It's not about passing landmark legislation, because you can always pass more laws, and these things should be done thoughtfully, one step at a time.
Right, so he stole the thunder, but being a New Yorker, I wanted to say, well, Eric Adams took his first 3 paychecks in Bitcoin. Anyway.
Sorry.
You know, it's okay. So,
by
your
the
show.
way, it did come out that the day after Eric won the election, he flew on my plane to Puerto Rico, and he was in Puerto Rico when he made that tweet.
Yeah. And so there's some of us in this room that were with, some of us in this room were with the mayor last week, and yes, he's very excited about it. He brags about it all the time, and it's wonderful. Thank you, Brock. So is it an inflation hedge for someone like Panama or El Salvador to ostensibly try to replace their fiat currency with Bitcoin? Or eventually it might be a basket. Who knows? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we have a parallel system right now. It's not this or that. Let's be practical about the reality. We're going to be living in a world with a parallel system for some time. And you want to make sure that you are functioning in both worlds. I wouldn't encourage any of you to dump your entire portfolio of, call it, legacy or traditional assets to go 100% into cryptocurrency. I think that would be terrible advice. But in the same way, you know, if you have no exposure to, call it, the new economy, you know, this future financial system, you probably do want to get a little bit of exposure to it. And so we're going to live in a parallel system for a while. And the nation states that embrace this future financial system are going to benefit from all the foreign direct investment and economic development that comes there. I mean, the people that move there. I mean, take a look at what's happened in Puerto Rico with no legislation. I mean, what made capitals capitals? It's the concentration of intellectual, social, creative, and financial capital. And this sort of room of people, if you can get we also had this very unique moment in history with COVID where we've accelerated this idea that you can work from anywhere. And so people are more mobile than they've ever been. And it creates an incredible opportunity for places that normally couldn't attract innovative businesses that can have a meaningful impact on these economies in ways that you never could. We're all kind of up in the air right now and looking for places to land. And how do you attract that? It doesn't require much. Obviously, that bar will rise.
So just to change topics slightly, so everybody's hearing about Metaverse this, Web 3.0 that. If you look at the Metaverse ecosystem and you think about, okay, how is this going to change an everyday person's life? I mean, there's people going from, I want to invest in real estate in the Metaverse to this is going to be my avatar for the rest of my life. I mean, when you're talking to like on television or something like that, when you're talking to a wide audience, how do you describe how the Metaverse is going to affect someone's life, IRL?
So my background prior to this was in another version of the Metaverse. I got started with digital currency back in the late 1990s.
Warcraft.
Yeah, coming from baseball cards, Magic the Gathering cards, Pokemon, your Muds and your Moos, your Ultimas, and then your Ultima Online, your EverQuest, your massively multiplayer games, your World of Warcrafts, your Second Life. I was the main market maker for digital currencies in all of these virtual worlds. I built up a supply chain in my early 20s of hundreds of thousands of people that played video games or played in the Metaverse or worked in the Metaverse principally in China to mine these digital currencies. And so we were PayPal's largest merchant for years. We were instrumental in the launch of Alipay. I became very familiar with high-risk transactions, cross-border payments. I had 97% market share in South Korea. We were doing $1 billion a year there. My main investor in that business was Goldman Sachs Principal Strategies. I was the first private investment ever to come out of the prop desk of Goldman, because they're like, you're managing 3,000 basically plus different currencies, which became more than that. And effectively virtual nations, and you're the market maker for all of this. Interesting stuff. So having watched this, the big difference between, call it that system and the new system, is that was built on Web 2. It was a closed system where most of the terms of services, of which I did violate, did not permit you to take that value out of the system.
So in other words, you couldn't take an avatar from one of the games to a different game.
Correct. The big difference here is this is still the same thing that exists within your massively multiplayer virtual world market. The difference is the interoperability that's being built into it, and that interoperability is making it even more interesting. It's expanding, and now with the Oculuses and the hardware, I think this is going to be a very long process, to be short. I don't think that we're all going to be living in the Metaverse playing Ready Player One in the Oasis in the next few years. But I'm a huge believer in it, but it's going to be a long process, and we're in another one of those sort of hype cycles. And when investing in these things, certainly as the quality of the interfaces improve, it's like building video games. It is a hit-driven business, and you have to build really, really good systems and really good tool sets for the content creation to make spending time in these environments something that you would want to do more than spending time in, call it, the analog world. And the Web3 side is, I think, going to be more pervasive, and it's going to touch more people's lives. I think it's worth talking about. So Web 1 was this idea of what the internet could be. I don't need to go through that. Web 2 was really the system being captured the system being captured by way of capitalism and forming these big tech companies, which really were monopolizing, the products and services that were there. And we've ended up with an internet system with effectively feudal lords. What the Web3 really is, and we talk about decentralization, I think is better described as the demonopolization of the Web2 businesses. They're going to be demonopolized as we turn them, and this doesn't even require government. Government can play a role in this, but we can do it through voting with our time or wallets, where these Web2 businesses are being turned into public utilities. And all of that data, which is their core of their business, that data goes into a public database or public ledger where anyone can build an interface. And that's the big thing that's changing. And you have to think about what was the most precious commodity historically. It was gold. Then it became oil. Right now it's our data. And so the big thing that's changing is rather than all of our data being monetized by, call it the FANG, we're going to be participants and be remunerated and compensated for it as we consent to share our data, as we take our digital identity back, as we have sovereignty as it relates to our digital identity in Web3, as we own our names and we provide privilege, we consent to give our data to various parties. They're going to have to make us offers for us to consent, and we'll have the ability to revoke our information. The analogy I like to use with legislators on Capitol Hill is how you couldn't transfer your phone number from one carrier to the other back in the late 90s and the very early 2000s. But our phone numbers became as important as our social security numbers. It became a very important identity. And our government, fortunately, made it so that we could transfer our phone number from one carrier to another. That same sort of thing is what I envision happening with Web 2 as we sign out of Web 2 and we sign in to Web 3.
But that was a regulation, right?
Yes.
That was a top-down federal regulation from the FTC.
Correct.
That said, Verizon, you can't keep this phone number if it belongs to Todd Gergen.
They should pass similar legislation as it relates to Facebook.
Absolutely agree.
Let me take my data elsewhere if I want and delete it.
Yeah. So that is, obviously this all boils back down to open source and scalability. And so if you're looking at kind of frameworks of the metaverse, which I think you actually articulated very well, if you're looking at the framework, the open source network and framework of the metaverse, and how do you ensure that scalability is there when you're looking at what metaverse I want to join? This is something that, because it can be as important as Facebook was 5 years ago to people, where their whole lives and businesses, especially in the third world, revolved around Facebook. How do you kind of judge a metaverse's scalability?
Well, I think it's still early days, and I wouldn't put too much trust too quickly, back to the earlier lesson,
yes.
into these things. I think it's a good time to be experimental. It's a good time to play with these different systems. And, the ones that are going to capture your attention are going to be the ones that have the most entertainment value. And that's going to come from content. And do they attract the right content creators? Because at the end of the day, if you're spending time in a metaverse or a virtual world, you're generally there to do something that you find enjoyable. Yeah. And the question is, who produces that stuff best? Just putting a blank sandbox out, I think, is going to be good for this phase. It's ultimately in who attracts the most talent. If you're talking about a layer 1 blockchain, right, it's who's attracting the most developers. In a metaverse, it's ultimately, yes, is it scalable? Is the underlying infrastructure sound? But it's the things to be looking at, what's going to differentiate the winners from the losers is who's attracting the creators, who's attracting the artists into their metaverse is the thing that I think will be the main differentiator with time.
Okay, so interesting question. So if you did not have $1 invested anywhere in crypto ecosystem world, where would you look to invest today?
Well, it's the
this
same.
Is what everybody actually came for.
Well, I mean, it's the same advice. You're saying if you haven't
Zero exposure.
Yeah, if
Zero
you have
exposure.
zero exposure, the advice I give to everyone right now is, first of all, I wouldn't encourage you to invest if this is your first step. I would encourage you to participate, to invest in yourself and your own knowing. The first thing you do is you go out. You don't need to go read a bunch of research papers. You don't have to listen to a bunch of talks, watch a bunch of YouTube videos. You don't even have to spend much time thinking about it. The first thing you do is you go buy $20. You see, I said I didn't say invest. You go buy $20 worth of Bitcoin. That's what the orange pill costs. It's $20, and if you can't afford 20, it's 10. And people are like, well, shouldn't I do at least 20,000 or 200,000 or 2 million? No. It's not about putting a bunch of money in. The first step is just the basic understanding of what's going on here. Assume you're going to lose it, so it's better to start with 20. I assume you can afford to lose $20. Go buy $20 to begin understanding what's actually happening here. You don't have to invest a bunch of time or thought into this. That's your first baby step, and from there begins the journey of understanding. And I should always give a disclaimer, because once you do that,
You're hooked.
it may change your life. It's good. It may cause you to start asking questions that you may not have asked otherwise. It may cause you to start learning things that you never thought you wanted to know, but you'll become incredibly curious about it, and you'll start to understand how deep the rabbit hole goes. So if you are really, really happy with the status quo, if life is perfect, this may not be for you. Stick to the blue pill.
Right, both sides. Okay, so back to just to mine that a little bit. So you buy $20 of Bitcoin, and then you go spend it, and you go see what you can buy, whether it's a virtual.
Well, go do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
You may decide, well, I want to go check out one of these altcoins. I might want to go buy some Doge or some Casper or whatever it might be. You may want to go buy your first NFT. You may be a member of the diaspora living in the United States, and you may want to see what it's like to send money back home to El Salvador or Panama or Africa. To each their own, because it's choose your own adventure. There's all sorts of fun things you can do with this. The point is, you're saying yes to the future. You are choosing to be a participant in the world that is changing. And you will be better off having some understanding of what's happening here. You may decide this isn't the right moment in your life and to put it on the back burner for another year, but you've at least taken the time to have a baseline sort of understanding of what it is, because you've made your first transaction. You have officially, and by the way, it's worth mentioning because, the Ukraine, it's the same sort of thing. People are like, what can I do? I'm not happy about what I'm seeing, but who am I? I'm just one person. I can't make an impact, and so they don't do anything, though they may want to do something, or maybe they talk about it in a time where we have a lot of virtue signaling. All you have to do, if you care about what's happening in the Ukraine and you have a position on it that you'd like to support what's happening in the Ukraine, support the Ukrainians, all you have to do is give $1. $1 makes you a doer. Giving $1 separates you from those that saw and did nothing. It puts you in that very important club as someone that did something. And you go, well, but it's only $1. But that's your baby step. And that may be all that you ever do, but you at least did something. But once you've done that first thing, then all of a sudden you start going, well, maybe I can do this other thing. We spend too much time in life trying to do the perfect thing or that big thing. And a lot of times in life, you just have to begin the adventure. You have to take your first step. And it's as simple as giving $1. And keep in mind, the little things, we may be small and we may only be able to do a little. But when many of us are doing a little, in aggregate, it does a lot. It can change the world.
And it gives you the platform and the authority to speak about it. So it's, so I bought a 1/1000th of a Bitcoin, and I used my cryptocurrency to contribute to USA for Ukraine or any one of the other very, very valuable entities that are doing it. And then you can talk about it. And it does, once you start talking about it, you can see who else is talking about it, and you become part of the community, I think, which is
correct. Well, you all of a sudden you have a seat at the table.
Exactly.
You are a member of the future, and your conversations will probably get more interesting. You know, when you're playing around with all of this future tech, you know, these things that are in some way transforming the world around us, you're a participant in change. Because remember, the future is going to happen to you, or it's going to happen with you. So I suggest you participate so that we can co-create a future in which we all want to live. You know, it's going to happen to you or with you, so please get involved.
Yeah, so we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to give you the floor to talk about Senate runs or politics or anything you want to talk about.
Well, I wake up, you know, every day asking myself, how can I make the biggest, most positive impact in the world? I measure my success in life not by what I have, but by what I give in the world, the impact I'm having on the world around me. And I don't think there's no going into government in the United States and trying to make sure that we're moving in the right direction is where I think I can make the biggest, most positive impact in the world. So as long as that continues to be true, I will never stop running. I'm going to run like heaven. I don't know where I'm running. Right now I'm filed for a U.S. Senate run in Vermont. I haven't announced because I'm on a listening tour, which I think more politicians should do. I'm going around and talking to business owners and as many people in Vermont as I can to build consensus and hear from them that, yes, we want you to do this. Yes, you want to do this. And that's almost every one I've met so far. But I believe that from a process perspective, rather than saying, no, I'm the person that should be representing you, I think at least in my case, it should begin with conversation. And so I'll be making that decision sometime soon. The elections are, midterm elections are November 8th this year. But I think I could make a potentially very big impact as a U.S. Senator. I also think I can make a big impact just by running. And one thing I do encourage everyone to do, I think we need more people, really, really talented people running for public office. You know, this is an act of public service. And it's not about serving ourselves, it's about serving everyone else. And if we had, in the U.S., I'll speak as an American, but a lot of these things apply elsewhere in the world. If the most talented Americans, the most successful Americans in all their fields, whether it be the best school teachers, the best nurses, the best of everything, if we had the most talented Americans running for office and serving in public office with deep domain expertise around every subject that matters, that's relevant to our future, you know, food security. I mean, that's the one that scares me right now. I don't know if you know, but the figure that I just saw is that food production this year is down 35%. Food production is down 35%, in part because of disruptions to supply chains related to everything through the pandemic, but also the war right now, the fertilizer that comes out of the Ukraine, Belarus, Russia. 35% reduction in food supply. We are likely going to see famine in places that have never seen it before. Civil unrest that comes from it. You know, if ever there was a moment for people to step up and say, how can I be of highest service to the world around me? And if that means running for public office, getting involved with our existing system of governance, you know, that's what I'm focused on above all else. And it's not just the U.S. I'm running around the world trying to help everyone else.
I'd love it if you ran.
One question, Bob. Are you running for president?
Well, I'm filed for a U.S. Senate run, so one thing at a time.
Baby steps, baby steps, baby steps.
I mean, we don't know who the field is in 2024 yet, but that first run was a trial run. It was a reconnaissance mission to make sure I know how it's done. Because when it counts, when it matters, you better be prepared.
Thank you very much. Let's go.
I mean, talk about a power hour. Thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time to be here. I think, first of all, thank you for all of the work you do, particularly on the legislative side, right? Again, I think it's a good lesson for us, or a good reminder for us. There's an awful lot of education, and the industry bears a large part of that responsibility, right? So thank you for the reminder. Thank you for your time. I know you're incredibly busy, so wonderful having you here. Thank you all for joining. Thank you to the people online for joining. It's been such a pleasure hosting you today. Please join us again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be tackling a lot of the topics that have been raised today. Enterprise, governance, where does blockchain really add value? Enjoy the rest of your evening.